When I set out to create my first Oracle deck, nothing about it made sense. I was terrified, overwhelmed, and had no idea where to begin. And the craziest part about it was the very thing that was motivating me made absolutely no sense to logic. In this video, I share the practical organizing principles that helped me move through the resistance from concept to completion. But this is more than a how-to. It's about how my way of relating with the emergence of this deck helped me heal patterns of codependency, transforming fear into power, not knowing into beauty, and patterns of burnout into regenerative ways of creating and relating. And most of all, it's a testimonial to the healing power of art and what it was like to create within a continuous surrender to a greater mystery that was guiding my healing right alongside this creation. My relationship with burnout and self-love began decades ago. At one point, I was juggling 4 jobs while attending art school full-time and terrified that if I slowed down, I wouldn't be able to survive. The art I was making mirrored my internalized oppression to the degree that the more art I made, the more my self-hate only seemed to get worse. The day I discovered yoga was the day that began to change. Years later, despite the progress I'd made in healing my relationship with my body, my self-esteem, I felt like I had reached a dead end in my relationships. I couldn't help but notice how my codependency struggles seemed to be mirroring my very avoidance of the thing that I had loved the most as a child, which was art, but not for performance, not for validation, but for the joy of creating. And in 2020, I walked through a threshold of commitment to reclaiming my relationship with my soul, with my joy, and with creativity itself. Centering in chakra psychology and the mythic and natural worlds, I turned to expressive arts to heal my inner child, to take complete responsibility for healing the wounded masculine and feminine energies within myself, and to validate and accept myself in ways I realized no one and no thing outside of me could ever do for me. And then 27 months later, I heard the call for the Emergence deck. It was December 2021. I was on a call with a coach who I had studied with years ago. And in those days, CrossFit had been opening me up to a relentless tenacity and a wild and insatiable passion for nature that I never knew existed in me. And as a newly certified coach, I was completely lit up around helping other women embody the same confidence, esteem, and adventurous spirit that I was awakening to through functional movement. It's how I first got connected with Carl. And on that call, 8 years later, he asked me this simple question: do you believe in yourself? Because I believe in you, and not just because you're paying me to say that. Something about the way he said it shook me to my core. Mentally, I understood believe in yourself, but when I really felt into it, it was as though the circuitry for feeling this in my body just wasn't in place. Yet I knew I could develop this, just as I had rewired self-hate into self-acceptance through movement, through nature, and just as I'd been seeding self-love, esteem, and sovereignty through my creative practices, I saw how this deck could be a vessel for reclaiming the very power that I had been outsourcing. The Emergence deck became the next level of embodying love for me, and the biggest challenge of all was nothing about this made sense to logic. Initially, I thought the deck would be a teaching tool for art therapy. But as I sat on the living room floor of another one of my teachers a few weeks later, surrounded by printouts of artwork, Coral reflected back something far more simple. Let the process be the medicine. The creative process became an experiment in exploring what it meant to let love lead through practical daily actions. So instead of forcing my way into answers or collapsing in overwhelm, I practiced meeting the daily resistances with curiosity, paying attention to what brought me closer to myself, and prioritizing joy. My focus centered in letting the process transform me into the kind of person that I had been seeking externally. And the more I surrendered to what this actually looked and felt like, the more the deck began emerging in ways that I never could have anticipated. On the practical side, I did build spreadsheets with tabs for vendor research, profit margins, crowdfunding pledges, and to-do lists. I mapped out my deadlines, advertising, launch, publishing, and distribution, and I worked backwards to stay on track. But the deeper truth was this. My success depended far less on project management and way more on energy management. And here's what that looked like. 1, as a way to supercharge my creative process and power my way through the daily resistances, I did something counterintuitive. For the first 3 months, I committed to a rhythm of 9 paintings a month, working for 90-minute sessions to a playlist that I loved. I took the pressure off of creating any new work for the deck. These paintings were simply for enjoyment. They were energetic anchors and guides of the process. And they also were a way of ensuring that I was no longer self-abandoning as I slowly began re-exploring the dating world after a few years in the chrysalis. 2, I prioritized enthusiasm and presence over productivity. I traveled to inspiring places where communing with the land and stars further ignited the flow. And the spirit of adventure and love of nature kept my heart engaged. And it's what allowed some of the most inspiring aspects of the deck to emerge all on their own. 3, I disciplined myself to stay away from the screen, to take myself on dates, and to rest before the burnout hit. The day before the Kickstarter launched, I still wasn't sure what I would say in the pitch video. But rather than forcing a script, I made the radical decision to take myself to the beach. And of course, to logic, this made no sense. I was wasting time. But in doing so, I met this woman who offered to photograph me as the sun put on this spectacular light show. And the images ended up all over the campaign. Leading from love and surrendering into my not knowing opened pathways that I couldn't ever have planned. The infrastructure wasn't just spreadsheets and calendars. It was an energetic commitment to loving my way through and surrendering the outcomes. And I'm not going to pretend that this was easy. For the most part, I felt like I was taking step after step in the dark, and it was maddening. Often my prayer looked something like this, and every prayer I would seal through art. When it came time to share this deck publicly, first through the crowdfunding campaign, and then when the deck actually got published, I was terrified. I couldn't help but feel stripped bare. Like my innermost psychotherapeutic endeavors were on full display for the world. It took 3 months post-publication before I could muster the courage to open the guidebook and read it for the first time. One spring afternoon, after teaching about Kali Ma in a yoga class, inspiration tapped me to book time at a recording studio. And within an hour, I was reading that entire book for the first time into a microphone through the voice of someone who believed in the medicine that I was bringing forward. Despite feeling like I'd walked into that recording studio with a committee of naysayers, some greater motivation was driving me. It was the seed that I had been nurturing since that previous spring. It was this desire to wholeheartedly live my dharma and to honor the sentient intelligence through which it emerged with the heart and commitment of a fiercely devoted lover. Through this project, I painted myself into becoming someone who believed in herself, not as an idea, but as an embodied truth. I rewove patterns of self-abandonment into sovereignty, and I saw how art isn't just something I make, it's who I am. And it's also how I remember who I am. It's what draws me closer to the greater mystery that guides me, inspires me, and holds what's too big to hold all on my own. The system that carried me through wasn't about rigid plans or endless lists. It was about creating containers for energy to flow, meeting resistance as an ally, giving my wholehearted effort, optimizing for enthusiasm, letting joy be the fuel, and giving it all over to something greater. It's basically the same principles that CrossFit had brought out of me all those years earlier. And if you find yourself standing before a soul calling that also feels terrifying, see if you can just quiet yourself and get a feel for what part of you is dying and what part of you is ready to be born. Let yourself play with organizing some system for yourself that's oriented around fostering the emergence of the part of you that's ready to be birthed into this world. Because your birth is for the world, and because love isn't just an idea, it's a doorway to the infinite, and a compass that you can organize your entire life around.